This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, guys, welcome to my session. This is DataGuard webinar series. Actually, I have planned, and I will try to cover all the 19C DataGuard features and concept, and also I will tell about from the starting. So hope you will like it this session. So as you know, everyone knows my name is Ahmad, and these are some introduction. So I'm skipping this. And basically, my goal is whatever I know about the Oracle database and the components I need to tell my DBA community. That's why I'm arranging this free webinar series. And this is the first picture. Maybe you know that. So this is about Oracle Data Guard. So what is basically a data guard? Data guard is a you can say main component of Oracle database high availability solutions. Okay, if suppose any client is talking about high availability, so you can give with this Oracle data guard feature, and it has plan and unplanned downtime, and by that you can manage client business. So basically, data guard is a management. Okay, and you can say it is a monitoring, and you can say automation software infrastructure that basically work for production database, and it can be one or it can be more than one. Okay, standby database. So basically, it will protect your client database against failures, against errors and corruption, and because it can happen anytime. Okay, so it will provide basically DBA to manage the production easily. Suppose in case if your production suddenly corrupted or crash, so you have a data guard. By that you can do the failover from production to standby, and your standby can become production, and your client business will not stop for a longer period. So by this method you can provide fastest availability to your client. So that's why this is the main components of high availability solutions, right? If you see in the diagram, so you can see one is a database and another one is database copy. So basically you will configure your standby database on the basis of your production copy. Okay, so you can take a backup of the production, and after that you can configure your standby database, and then you can establish a connection between the production and standby, and your data will apply through redo. So that's why in the diagram it is mentioned redo transport. So this is overall picture of internally data guard, how it behaves. That is all about. So basically data guard configuration, your production database will be there. So you can call it as primary database, and another thing is required is standby database, which will basically synchronize copy of your production, and how you can configure by backup of your primary database. So you can create up to 30 standby database from 1 to 30, and that standby database will work together with the primary database, and other standby database will be or you can say equal as production. Okay, so all data guard standby database can enable up to date read access actually, and redo will receive from the primary database and it will apply, so that your standby database will uh, behave as production. So we have two concepts, whether you can apply a real-time redo apply, or whether you require some delay on the standby, so that you can configure, that will depend on your discuss later. So I hope now data guard is clear to everyone, or if you have any question, you can ask me here, or you can post in the chat box. Please don't speak because audio will be not good from your side, so I can't listen. So you can use the chat box for any questions. Okay. So whatever questions you have in your mind, you can post it, at the end of the session. I will cover that. Okay. So now, how many types of database, standby database we have? So we have three types of standby database. Earlier it was two, but now we have three. And can you repeat the data guard concept? Okay. See, data guard concept, as I said, it is a transactional copy of your primary database. And why you are configuring? Because you want to provide high availability to your customer. So if suppose anything happen on your production, your standby can become production, and your client will not wait for many hours for repairing the production. Okay, in case if suppose you don't have data guard and your your production crash, so what you will do, you require a backup, and after that you will restore the backup, then you will perform the recovery, and then it will take time if suppose your database had in terabyte. So now with Oracle data guard feature, you can give your client production database within a second or within a few minutes. Only you need to perform failover. Okay, so that require minimal downtime. So that's why data guard, basically the concept of high availability. Now got it? Okay. Now we have three types of standby database. As I said, one is physical standby, one is logical standby, and third one is snapshot. Okay, so physical standby is basically is the number one which required for your data guard. Every client wants physical standby. So what is actually it is? It is actually identical copy of your primary database on a block per block basis. Okay, so whatever block you have on your production, same you will get as here also, and it will synchronize with your primary database, and it will update by performing recovery using redo data that will be received from the primary database. So Oracle database 12c enable physical standby to receive and apply redo while it is open in read only mode. So this is the new feature which is started from 12c onwards. So it has in 19c also. Okay, so that's why logical database, standby database has no value these days, because physical standby is giving everything. Otherwise, earlier logical standby you can open read only mode, but now standby, physical standby is giving that feature. So basically, DBA prefer the physical standby. Okay. Now, what is logical standby? Logical is standby basically contain same logical information which your production has. Okay, and physical organization and structure of the data can be different. So this is the difference between physical and logical. Please note it. And logical standby is basically synchronized with the primary database by transforming the redo in the redo received from the primary database into SQL statement. Okay, so in logical standby, basically redo will not transfer. Redo will transfer in the form of SQL statement, and that SQL statement will apply on the logical standby database. So this is the second difference between logical and physical. Got it? And this you can also use for data protection and reporting. And the another benefit is that you can use for upgrades. Okay, so suppose the table in a logical standby database can be used simultaneously for recovery and for other tasks such as reporting and queries and etc. And in logical standby, basically log miner will apply the SQL. Okay, so that is another concept. If you heard about log miner to analyze the redo log files, so you can check in Oracle database utilities documentation. So it will give you more better information about the log miner. Okay. Now, snapshot standby database. So this is basically a database that is created by converting a physical standby into a snapshot standby database. Okay. So for a snapshot standby database, you required a physical standby, because from physical standby, you will convert to snapshot, then you will get the snapshot. And it basically used for updates, and but those updates you don't required on the production or copy. So that's why when you get back to physical standby, this updates will be discarded. Okay, suppose you want to update, you want to check some applications queries on your standby. So the better method is convert into physical snapshot, or sorry, snapshot standby, and then you check that those updates, and later when you convert your snapshot standby to physical, it will automatically discarded from the standby. So your standby, physical standby, will become identical as production. Okay, and it is basically used for testing. Now got it? All three types of standby database. Now another concept is used in data guard is basically the services. So basically data guard has three services. One is redo transport services, means how redo will transfer from primary database to one standby or more standby or archival destination. And second is apply services, how redo will apply, whether it is applied through redo apply concept or whether it will apply through SQL apply concept. So what is the difference between that? I already told that redo apply, basically redo data is applied on the standby database by using Oracle Media Recovery, and SQL apply used for logical standby. So in that, it will receive the redo data first, and then it will transform into SQL statement, and then it will generate the SQL statements which executed on the logical standby. Okay. The third services you will get role management services. As I said that we have failover and switchover. So these are two management services. By that you production and standby. So if you have planned downtime, then you will do switchover. And if you have failover, database failure, suppose on your production, then you will perform failover operation. So that comes in role management services. Now, as I said, we have a two role transition. One is switchover and another one is failover. So basically, uh, the switchover feature enables you to switch the role of the primary database to one of the available standby. So that you will do according to your plan. Suppose you want to update your OS, or you want to do some hardware maintenance, or you want to shift something from one server to another, then you can go better to do switchover, because you know each and everything and you will plan, and according to that you will do the switchover. So when you do the switchover, your your standby become production, and you can perform on the previous primary database some operations, and then you can roll back. Okay. And failover is basically when any failure occurs on the primary database. So during failover operation, the primary database is removed from the data guard environment, and you can assume standby database can become the primary database role. So you will do that actually. So you invoke the failover operation on the standby database that you want to failover to the primary role. So you can also enable fast start failover, which I will discuss later on, which allows DataGuard to automatically and quickly fail over to a previously chosen synchronized standby database. So that is better method where DBA can set already if anything happen, then it will fail over. Okay. Uh, Satya, log out and log in again because I hope am I audible? Okay, so database that are disabled after a role transition are not removed from the broker configuration. Broker configuration is another utility. By that you can manage data guard very well. So yeah, that is all this point for that data guard broker configuration. So whenever you have data guard broker configuration, then in that they are disabled in the sense that database are no longer managed by the broker. So to re-enable broker management of these databases, you must reinstate or recreate the databases. Okay. Now, this is the overall internal architecture of DataGuard, which has everything. So everything about means you have primary database, and you can see that there is a redo buffer, then LGWR, then online redo log file, then ARCN, then redo log file. Then you are seeing LNSN process, then you have network link, and then you have RFS, then you have standby redo logs, then archiver, then archive redo logs, then MSP or LSP, then standby database. Okay, so these are the components which basically they are in your data guard architecture. So by using this architecture, data guard minimize its impact on the primary database. So data guard uses several processes to achieve the automation that is necessary for disaster and high availability. So in next diagram, I will talk about this more about the process. So what are the primary database process we have? So you are seeing there is NSSN, okay, or there is also TTNN actually. So that is not mentioned is in this diagram. So earlier it was not there. So first I will talk about log writer. So log writer basically collect the transaction redo information and update the online redo logs. Okay, but if you are using synchronization database, SYNC, sync standby database, then LGWR process passes the redo to the NSS, that is network server sync process, which basically ship the redo to the standby directly to the remote file server RFS process, okay, on the standby. Then LGWR waits for confirmation from the NSS process before acknowledging the commit. So that is the condition. If you are using sync method in your standby, then your log writer of production will be wait for confirmation whether redo is reach over there on a standby or not. Okay, so this is the case of maximum protection. And another concept, if you are using asynchronous standby concept, then log writer will not wait for the confirmation from the standby, then on that time this NSSN will not involve. Then the new process will come, that is TTNN, redo transport slave process. It will read the redo from either the redo log buffer in memory or the online redo log file, and then ship the redo to standby database, other than starting the asynchronous TTNN process. So LGWR has no interaction with any asynchronous standby database destination. I hope this point is clear to everyone. And then you can use ARCN. So ARCN process basically create an online copy of redo log file locally for in primary database for recovery. And also ARCN is also responsible for shipping the redo data to RFS process at standby database, and proactively it will deduct and resolving gaps on all standby database. So how many archiver process is there? It is 30, and by default it will start 4. Clear? So these are primary database process. So one is LGWR or ARCN, and then NSSN will come in synchronization, and TTNN will come in a synchronization mechanism. Okay, so these 4 processes will be your primary database processes. And next is standby processes. So what is standby processes? First process is RFS. So RFS is basically remote file server. It will receive the redo information from the primary database, and it will write the redo into standby redo logs if you have, or directly it will archive redo logs, and then it will go to MRP or LSP process. So each NSSN and ARCN process from the primary database has its own RFS process. Okay. And the use of standby redo log is another concept which I will cover later on, where you want real-time apply, then you will use standby redo logs. Okay, so that is different concept in data guard. Now another process on the standby is ARCN. So as everyone knows that ARCN process archives the standby redo logs. So that's why in figure it is there. And MRP process is basically, or LSP process, that is apply actually redo data on a standby. So MRP is manage recovery process. So for physical standby, MRP will be used, and MRP applies archive redo log information to the physical standby. And logical standby process, that is LSP, it is used when you are using logical standby. Okay, so that is the difference between that. So whenever whenever you start recovery between the production and standby, so on that time MRP process start. So I hope you know the command when you fire alter database, recover, manage standby database. Okay, so that SQL statement basically perform the recovery. And if you say disconnect, then yeah, MRP background process start. And if you use the data guard broker to manage your standby database, so broker always start the MRP background process for a physical standby. So I hope standby process clear. Now another concept is physical
Can you
standby.
just tell me LS? Can you go back to the pre?
Boss, I already said that use the chat box, boss. Yeah, tell me.
NSSN. Can you just tell me that? I might have missed it.
Okay, NSSN is basically a primary database process which basically transfer the redo data to the standby site when you are using synchronization. Okay, so then NSSN will come. If you are using sorry, a synchronization mechanism, then TTNN will come. Actually, TTNN is not mentioned in this figure. I have posted actually old diagram, but in 19C books, excuse me, TTNN is also there. So NSS basically reads the redo from a redo log buffer, or it will transfer that to the redo data to the standby database to RFS. I hope clear.
Thank you.
Sorry. Now physical standby redo apply architecture. So here you can see that production, primary, and redo stream, redo apply, and all that. So basically the production database, which is linked to one or more standby up to 30 that are identical copy of the production, and the limit of 30 standby database, how you can manage. There is a parameter log underscore archive underscore desk underscore n is basically 1 to 30. And from 12C 12.1, yeah, from 12.1 you can have maximum number of destination is 31. One is used for local archive and the rest 30 will be used for standby databases. And there is a mechanism for sync, FAR for sync, that is different concept to perform better in data guard. These days DBA use this concept also, so I will cover later on. And the standby database, which is updated by the redo, that is automatically shipped from the primary database. So redo can be shipped as it is generated, or first it will be archived and then shipped to the standby. So that depends on mechanism which you are using for your data guard. So during planned downtime, you can perform switch over to a standby, as I said, and whenever failure occur, you can perform failover to one of the standby database. So the physical standby can also be used to back up the primary database. So this is another benefit you can get from the standby, because you know that if you do the backup on production, it will take too much time, it will increase the load on the production. So that's why better do the backup from the standby database. And it should be physical standby, and it should be used real-time apply. So whenever you configure real-time apply, you required standby redo logs also. So that is the real-time apply architecture concept. So I will cover those architecture also, so don't worry about that, because in one session I can't tell each and everything. Now, logical standby database SQL apply architecture, as I said, it will use the SQL statement. Okay, and the redo data is transformed into equivalent SQL statement by using log miner technology, and these SQL statements are then applied to the logical standby database. So the logical standby is open in read write mode and is available for reporting capabilities. By opening the logical standby database in read write mode, you required some additional things, and in reporting you required index or materialized view you can create that do not exist in the primary database. So that is another benefit you will get it. So logical standby database can be used to perform basically rolling database upgrade. So that is the better things which you can get from logical standby. So it will minimize downtime when you are upgrading to a new database, patch sets, or full database releases. So better to go with logical standby. Now another concept is in data guard, automatic gap deduction and resolution. So basically this will done by which process? ARCN. So if connectivity is lost basically between the primary database and one or more standby, then redo data that is being generated on the primary database cannot be sent to the standby database. Okay. So when connection reestablished, data guard automatically deduct that what are the missing archive redo log file. So that is called as gap, and then it will automatically transfer the missing archive redo log file to the standby by using the ARCN process. Okay, and then standby database will be synchronized with the primary database without manual intervention by the DBA. But that not happen real actually. Okay, because of so many reasons in that, then DBA need to perform the recovery. So better method is go with incremental backup. By that, if you have too much gaps, about almost 1000 archive redo log files, suppose you have a gap, then you can perform incremental recovery on the standby database. That is the fastest method to synchronize the standby with the production. Gap is basically happens when you don't have a network between the production and standby. Then your redo will not transfer to the standby, then your standby will be not up to date up to the primary. And suppose you are not checking your primary database, you didn't configure automatic script which actually send the email that primary database is not synced with the standby database not synced with the primary, then you will not know about that. If suppose you are managing 1000 databases in your client in your environment. Okay, so the better method is use the shell script to check the gaps and to check the down or status of standby, and then you will get the mail. So by that you can check that okay, this production standby database is down, now we need to check what it is going on over there. Clear? Now another concept very important that
One
is
question. One
data
question.
guard protection modes. Yeah, anyone want to say who is S?
Satya.
Okay, use full form
When you
first.
okay,
Yeah.
when you say the incremental backup from 12C, you have a
See,
concept called the
questions I
network.
will cover at the end. Questions I will cover at the end. So use the chat box. I will cover at the end. Okay. Data guard production modes. Basically, we have three modes: maximum production, maximum availability, and maximum performance. So maximum production will give you maximum production. It means no data loss occur if the primary database. So basically what will happen in that? Basically redo data which actually transferring to the standby. So uh, it requires the confirmation from the standby side. Okay, if it is not getting, it will not commit on the production. And if suppose it is not getting the confirmation, it primary database will be shut down, so that data loss will not happen. So this is maximum protection concept. And maximum availability is basically provide the highest level of availability with, so in that transaction does not because as we know that in maximum production mode, transaction does not commit until the redo data applied on the standby database, at least one standby. Okay, but in maximum availability, primary database will not shut down if redo is not applied. So because it is unsynchronized mode, and gap can happen, and when gaps is there, then all the gaps are resolved and the primary database is synchronized, and then your standby database will come in available mode. So this mode guarantees that no data loss occurs if the primary database, but only if a second fault does not prevent a complete set of redo data being sent from the primary database to at least one standby. Otherwise, it will also not behave in that way. And the last one is maximum performance, which is basically default, and that is no surety of data protection because this works asynchronously. Means primary database will do commit whether your redo is applied on the standby or not. It will not wait for that. Okay, so that's why your primary production performance will be high. Okay. Now, another concept is what are the hardware and operating system is required. So, but the better thing is that we should use same hardware and operating system for both standby and production, but you can use different hardware for primary and standby, like number of CPU, memory sizes, and storage configuration. You can use differ, but that is not a good sense. And operating system for both database and operating system binaries can be different. Okay, so so that is, but it has many restriction. So you can check the documentation from Oracle support, that is 413484.1 and 1085687.1. So these are the two documentation. By that you can check about the flexibility between the hardware and operating system. The another concept about Oracle database software. So as everyone knows that DataGuard comes in database enterprise edition. Okay, and other than that you will not get it. And when Oracle DataGuard is available in your enterprise edition, then you can configure it. And if you use suppose ASM and OMF feature in DataGuard configuration, then you should use ASM and OMF on the primary and standby database both. If you are using anyone, then you can use anyone on both the side. So that is the requirement for that. Now, what is the benefit of Oracle DataGuard? I hope everyone knows that it provides maximum high availability solutions, and it provides continuous service. It will provide complete data guard protection. It will eliminate the idle standby, because standby database you can use for reporting and another query, providing a safeguard for disaster recovery. Flexible configuration means you can use DataGuard to configure the system to your needs by using the production modes and several other parameter which you can use to give better performance. So that parameter you should know about, which are parameter are required to perform better in DataGuard, and I hope I will cover that things. And it is a centralized management, means you can use enterprise manager cloud control to manage all configuration in your enterprise. So these are the benefits you will get. Okay, now tell me about this. How many types of a standby database we have? Physical, primary, logical, snapshot. Which are standby databases? I need to check you are in on the same page where I am. Physical, logical, snapshot, correct. Now, what is the maximum standby database supported by the DataGuard broker? Basically, not DataGuard broker. It is supported by in database DataGuard configuration. 30, perfect. And destination is changed from 12.1. So we have 31. Before 12.1, it was 30 only. One for local and 29 for standby. But now we have one for local and 30 for standby. That's why total 31. 31 destination from 12C R1. Okay. So thank you guys. that is all about the introduction of the data guard. So I hope you get something from this session. My source is Oracle documentation, and you can give the feedback. Basically, I didn't get the feedback anytime because participants are busy too much. So they don't want to send me the feedback. Okay. And for upcoming webinar, you need to register again because for every session you required a registration. And if you have any questions, you can ask me now in the chat box or you can write.